The modern world appears to us as a fractured landscape, a mosaic of jagged edges where lines are drawn not just on maps, but across the very fabric of human connection. We look out at society and see a cacophony of conflicting tribes, ideologies, and colors, each barricaded behind a wall of suspicion. There is a pervasive anxiety that hums beneath the surface of our daily lives, the quiet, gnawing fear of the other, the stranger, the one who is not like us. We are told that this friction is political or economic, or perhaps historical. But deep down, in the quiet moments of the night, we suspect the root lies somewhere deeper, in the very way we perceive our existence. We feel alone, isolated entities fighting for space in a crowded room. And from this primal sense of separation, the tragedy of prejudice is born. Now let us explore the profound wisdom found not in adding more, but in letting go. To understand the roots of the conflict between races, between nations, and between neighbors, we must first descend into the basement of the human psyche and examine the foundation upon which our modern consciousness is built. We must confront a startling possibility that the primary sensation you have of yourself as a distinct, isolated ego peering out at an alien world from behind the ramparts of your eyes is a hallucination. It is a socially conditioned mirage, a deception so total and so convincing that we have built our entire civilization upon it. We operate under the assumption that we come into this world like visitors arriving in a foreign country or birds flying into a cage. But this is not the way of nature. You did not come into this world. You came out of it, in the same way a wave comes out of the ocean or a flower comes out of the plant. The prevailing sensation of the modern individual is that of the skin-encapsulated ego. We feel that I, the essential self, the thinker of thoughts, the feeler of feelings, resides somewhere inside the skull, a little pilot controlling a biological machine made of meat and bone. And outside of this bag of skin lies a universe that is fundamentally not me. It is distinct, foreign, and often hostile. Because we define ourselves by this boundary, by this wall of skin, we create a fundamental dualism, the self versus the other. And once this dualism is established, the stage is set for every form of conflict, bigotry, and violence that history has ever recorded. If I am strictly in here and you are strictly out there, then my survival depends on maintaining the fortress. The ego, believing itself to be a fragile, temporary spark in a dark and indifferent universe, becomes obsessed with defense. It looks at the world and categorizes everything into two buckets: that which supports me and that which threatens me. This is the birth of the defensive posture that underpins racism. When we look at another human being and see a different skin color, a different facial structure, or hear a different accent, the skin-encapsulated ego does not see a variation of the same life force. It sees a boundary violation. It sees something alien. And because the ego is terrified of its own insignificance, it tries to inflate itself by pushing others down. It says, I am real, I am right, I am the standard, and therefore you are the deviation. This hallucination of separation creates a profound poverty of spirit. We act as though we are unconnected fragments, billiard balls bouncing off one another on a green table, with no connection other than the collision. But this view of reality is physically false. It is a superstition. The truth, as supported by both ancient wisdom and modern ecology, is that the individual and the environment are one behavioral process. You cannot describe the movement of a human being without describing the environment in which they move, just as you cannot describe the walking of a leg without describing the ground upon which it steps. There is no such thing as a solitary person. A person is a function of a community, of a biosphere, of a planet. We are continuous with the universe in the same way the head is continuous with the neck. However, we have been hypnotized to ignore this continuity. We have been trained to focus intensely on the differences, on the sharp edges where things appear to stop and start. This creates a tunnel vision of identity. We focus on the frequency of light bouncing off a person's skin, the melanin content, and we elevate this trivial surface detail to the status of an essential definition. It is a bizarre form of madness, really. Imagine a wave in the ocean declaring war on another wave because it is slightly taller or breaks at a different angle. We would laugh at the absurdity, seeing clearly that both are merely temporary movements of the same water. Yet human beings, trapped in the illusion of the separate self, take this absurdity with deadly seriousness. We construct entire hierarchies of worth based on the shape of the wave, forgetting the water entirely. This brings us to the mechanism that sustains this hallucination, the trap of abstract labels. The human mind is a marvelous instrument, capable of dissecting the world into manageable bits of information. We use language and concepts to grasp reality, much like a camera freezes a moving scene into a still photograph. We invent words like tree, cloud, man, woman, white, black. These words are useful tools for navigation. They help us agree on where to meet for dinner or which bus to take. But we commit a fatal error when we confuse the tool with the reality, or, as the Zen saying goes, when we confuse the finger pointing at the moon with the moon itself. A label is a static concept. A human being is a fluid process. When you look at another person and your mind immediately snaps the label foreigner or minority onto them, you have stopped seeing the person. You are no longer interacting with a living, breathing, changing mystery of consciousness. You are interacting with a word. You are interacting with a mental file in your own brain, stuffed with prejudices, assumptions, and past conditioning. The living reality of that human being, their fears, their loves, the subtle trembling of their hands, the unique history in their eyes, is obscured by the opaque sticker you have pasted over their face. This is the great tragedy of prejudice. It is a crime against reality. It is a refusal to see what is actually there in favor of a symbolic abstraction. The racist does not hate a person. The racist hates a category. They are fighting a war against a ghost in their own mind. They have allowed the menu to replace the meal. They are so obsessed with the description of the world that they have lost contact with the world itself. Consider how we use these labels to distance ourselves from the other. We create broad, sweeping generalizations. Those people, that culture, the enemy. These are verbal boxes. Once we shove a human being into a box, we no longer have to feel empathy for them. We have dehumanized them. We have turned them into objects. And you can do things to objects that you cannot do to fellow feeling beings. You can exploit an object, you can ignore an object, you can destroy an object. The violence of racism begins not with a gun or a fist, but with a word. It begins with the mental act of severance, of saying, "You are not like me. You are a category separate from my existence." This reliance on labels is a symptom of our anxiety. The fluid, ever-changing nature of reality is terrifying to the fixed ego. We want the world to be predictable. We want to know exactly where we stand. So we try to freeze the world with concepts. We say, "I am this kind of person, and you are that kind of person." It gives us a false sense of security. It makes us feel that the world is orderly. But life is not orderly in that way. Life is wiggly. It is complex, messy, and interconnected. By clinging to rigid definitions of race and identity, we are trying to straighten the wiggly lines of nature. We are trying to impose a grid of Euclidean geometry upon the organic chaos of a forest. It is an exhausting, impossible task, and the frustration of this impossibility often turns into aggression. We see this aggression manifesting in the desperate need to belong to an in-group. If the individual self feels small and vulnerable, it seeks to expand its power by merging with a tribe. We wrap ourselves in flags, in ideologies, in racial identities. We say, "I may be small, but I am part of the great group." But for the great group to exist, there must be a not group. For us to be the good guys, there must be bad guys. This is the binary trap of the conceptual mind. We define ourselves by what we are not. We define our virtue by contrasting it with someone else's perceived vice. We define our superiority by someone else's inferiority. In this state of delusion, we fail to see that the other is not an enemy to be destroyed, but a necessary condition for our own existence. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, we must sit with the weight of this realization, that the separation we feel is a lie. The walls we build are not made of stone, but of thought. We are suffering from a case of mistaken identity. We have mistaken the mask for the face, the role for the actor, and the map for the territory. We wander through life in a trance, believing that we are isolated fragments in a hostile universe. And so we arm ourselves with labels and judgments to keep the world at bay. We clutch our definitions of self and race like shields, unaware that the very weight of this armor is what is dragging us down. We are like a man who paints a tiger on a wall and then runs away in terror, sweating and trembling, forgetting that he was the artist who held the brush. We have painted the other as a monster, as a stranger, as a threat, and now we live in the nightmare of our own creation. The anxiety of the modern age is the anxiety of a part trying to pretend it is the whole, or rather, a part trying to pretend it is separate from the whole. It is the anxiety of a leaf trying to prove it is not part of the tree. It creates a deep, existential loneliness that no amount of political tribalism can cure. In fact, tribalism is just the scream of this loneliness, a desperate attempt to find connection by excluding someone else. But exclusion can never lead to wholeness. You cannot heal a fractured leg by smashing the other one. As we stand here in the ordinary world of struggle, looking at the divisions that plague our societies, we must recognize that no political policy or social program can ultimately solve this problem if we remain asleep to our true nature. We can police behavior, we can outlaw discrimination, and these are necessary steps. But they are treating the symptoms, not the disease. The disease is the perception of separation itself. The disease is the belief that your skin is a barrier rather than a bridge. The disease is the conviction that the universe is a collection of disjointed things rather than a unified process of thinging. So, the hero's journey we are embarking upon is not a journey of distance. We are not going to travel to a new land. We are going to travel inward to the place where perception arises. We are going to dismantle the optical delusion of the separate self. We are going to look at the labels we have plastered over reality and peel them back, one by one, to see the raw, unvarnished, and beautifully interdependent life that pulses underneath. We are going to challenge the very structure of the language we use to think about ourselves and others. It is a daunting task, for it requires us to question the most basic assumptions of our lives. It requires us to look in the mirror and ask, who is it that is looking? It requires us to face the insecurity of not having a fixed, rigid identity to hide behind. But it is the only path to true peace. It is the only way to dissolve the imaginary borders that we have drawn in blood across the face of the earth. The struggle is real, the pain is real, but the separation that causes it is a dream. And the time has come to wake up. If we look deeply into the machinery of our social conflicts, we encounter a psychological paradox that is as fascinating as it is disturbing. We have established that the separate ego, the isolated I, feels small and vulnerable in a vast universe. To compensate for this feeling of insignificance, the ego seeks to expand itself. It looks for something larger to belong to, something that will give it weight, validity, and a sense of immortality. And so we join the quote-unquote group. It might be a nation, a religion, a political party, or, in the context of our inquiry, a racial identity. We merge our little I into the big we. But here lies the rub. A group cannot define itself in a vacuum. The very concept of us requires the existence of them. You cannot have an inside without an outside. A club is only a club if there are people who are excluded from it. Otherwise, it is just everyone, and everyone provides no special sense of identity. To feel special, to feel chosen, to feel right, there must be someone else who is common, unchosen, and wrong. This is the mechanism of the in-group and the out-group. It is a fundamental dynamic of the collective ego. We derive our sense of solidarity not merely from who we are, but from who we are not. We bond over our shared differences from the other. Watch how strangers in a waiting room suddenly become friends when they can collectively complain about the receptionist. Watch how a fractured nation suddenly unites when faced with a common enemy. The other is the glue that holds the self together. And so we arrive at a startling realization. We need the enemy we claim to hate. This is the trial the hero must face, confrontation with the hidden complicity of the ego. We claim we want to eradicate prejudice, that we want to defeat the bad guys, that we want a world of pure light and goodness. But if we look closely at the structure of our own identity, we see that we are secretly in love with our opposition. Without the barbarian at the gate, the civilized man inside the city walls forgets who he is. Without the savage, the saint has no backdrop against which to shine. We are playing a game of tug of war, and for the game to exist, there must be someone on the other end of the rope. If the other side suddenly let go, we would fall on our backs. We would look foolish. The tension that gives our lives drama and purpose would collapse. Consider the optical illusion of the vase and the two faces. You know the one, where you can see either a white vase in the center or two black profiles looking at each other from the sides. You can switch your focus back and forth, seeing first the vase, then the faces, but you can never see both simultaneously as the primary image. Yet, and this is the crucial point, you cannot have one without the other. The white vase is defined by the black faces. The black faces are defined by the white vase. The boundary line between them is shared. It belongs to neither and both. In the world of social identity, we are constantly trying to separate the faces from the vase. We try to draw a line and say, this side is good and that side is evil. This side is us and that side is them. We want to keep the vase and destroy the faces. But in the physical universe, this is impossible. You cannot have a figure without a background. You cannot have a here without a there. When we try to obliterate the other, we are unknowingly trying to obliterate the background that makes our own existence visible. This is why the most fervent crusaders against a particular vice are often obsessed with it. The person who builds their entire identity around hating a specific group is, in a very real sense, enslaved to that group. They are thinking about them constantly. They are monitoring their movements, cataloging their crimes, obsessing over their existence. They are possessed. The other occupies their mind more than their own family does. The hater and the hated are locked in a lover's embrace of mutual negation. They are partners in a dance, swirling around a center of gravity that neither can escape. This brings us to the deep philosophical concept of mutual arising. In the West, we are trained to think in terms of cause and effect, or in terms of distinct entities colliding. We think of the world as being made of stuff, and we think this stuff fights other stuff. But in the Eastern view, in the view of the Tao, or nature, the world is a relationship. Polarity is not a war, it is a structure. Think of a magnet. It has a north pole and a south pole. They are opposite, they oppose each other. But can you cut a magnet in half to get rid of the south pole and keep only the north? Of course not. If you cut it, you just create two smaller magnets, each with a north and south pole. The poles are not two separate things, they are two ends of the one thing. Now, Apply this to the concept of race and cultural identity. We speak of white and black, east and west. We treat them as if they are chemically distinct substances that can be isolated. But white implies black. The concept of whiteness as a racial identity has no meaning whatsoever without the contrast of blackness or coloredness. If everyone were the exact same shade of beige, the concept would vanish. Therefore, in a linguistic and conceptual sense, the white man creates the black man, and the black man creates the white man. They inter-are, to borrow a phrase. They arise together. The anxiety and the struggle come because we do not see this unity. We identify exclusively with one pole of the magnet and try to wage war on the other. We want a world of all North Poles. We want a world of all light and no shadow, all us and no them. And because this goes against the fundamental grain of reality, it creates a perpetual state of frustration and violence. We are trying to perform a metaphysical impossibility. We are fighting the universe itself. Let us go deeper into this hallucination of separation. Why is it so persistent? Why is it so hard to see the unity of the human species? It is because we have been conditioned to ignore the space between things. We focus on the solids, the people, the bodies, the objects, and we treat the space between them as nothing. Because it is nothing, we assume it separates us. But space is not nothing. Space is the medium of relationship. It is the connective tissue of the cosmos. When you look at the stars in the night sky, you see points of light separated by vast darkness. You say, the stars are things and the space is emptiness. But you could not see the stars without the background of darkness. The darkness supports the light. The space connects the stars just as much as it separates them. It is a common field. In the same way, the differences between human beings, the variations in culture, language, and appearance, are not barriers. They are the intervals that allow the music of humanity to exist. If you press all the keys on a piano down at the same time, you don't get harmony, you get a terrible noise. You need the intervals. You need the spacing. You need the difference between a C note and a G note to create a melody. Racism and prejudice are essentially a deafness to the music. The racist hears a different note and thinks, that note is wrong, it shouldn't be there. It is threatening my note. They do not understand counterpoint. They do not understand that their note only has resonance because of the other notes. They want to pound a single key forever, drowning out the symphony, believing that uniformity is order. But uniformity is not order. Uniformity is death. The only place where everyone is exactly the same is the graveyard. Life is riotous, messy, colorful variation. So the struggle of the hero in this act, your struggle, is to confront the boredom of the ego. That sounds strange, doesn't it? But consider this. If the racists were to succeed, if they were to snap their fingers and eliminate every person who looked different, thought different, or prayed different, what would happen? For a moment, there might be a grim satisfaction. Finally, they would say, we are pure. But then silence would descend. The tension would vanish. The in-group would no longer have an out-group to define it. The solidarity would dissolve. Fractures would begin to appear within the pure group. New differences would be scrutinized. You are not quite the right shade of pure. Your eyes are a bit too close together. You come from the wrong side of the pure town. The ego, desperate for contrast, would immediately invent a new enemy from within its own ranks. It would slice the magnet again and again, searching for a south pole to fight. This is why prejudice is a bottomless pit. You cannot fill it because the hunger does not come from the object of hatred. It comes from the subject's own sense of emptiness. The other is just a screen onto which we project our own shadow. Jung, the great psychologist, spoke often of the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we deny, repress, and refuse to acknowledge. The greedy parts, the violent parts, the sexually deviant parts, the weak parts. The ego likes to think of itself as noble and good, So what do we do with the garbage? We dump it on the neighbor's lawn. We project it onto the other. We say, I am not greedy, those people are thieves. I am not violent, that race is savage. I am not sexually repressed, they are animals. It is a convenient psychological disposal mechanism. By making someone else the carrier of our sins, we get to feel holy, we get to feel superior, we get to feel clean. But this cleanliness is a lie. It is purchased at the cost of reality. When we demonize a whole group of people, we are not seeing them. We are seeing our own rejected demons reflected back at us. We are fighting our own reflection in the mirror, smashing the glass, and wondering why the world is broken. The trial of this section is to withdraw that projection. It is the painful, difficult work of owning your own darkness. It requires you to look at the other, the one you have been taught to fear or despise, and recognize that the qualities you hate in them are latent in you. And conversely, the qualities you admire in yourself are latent in them. This is the dismantling of the good guys versus bad guys narrative. It is a narrative that sells very well in Hollywood and in political campaigns, but it is a disastrous map for navigating reality. In reality, the line between good and evil runs not between nations or races, but right down the middle of every human heart. When we understand this, the rigid walls of the in-group begin to soften. We realize that the us versus them game is just that, a game. It is a drama we have agreed to play. And like any game, it requires rules and boundaries. The lines on a tennis court are arbitrary. We paint them there so we can play tennis. If we forget they are paint and start believing they are walls of fire, we have gone mad. We have painted lines of race and class across the human family. We have agreed to play the game of nations. There is nothing inherently wrong with games. They can be fun. Diversity is delightful. Cultural pride can be a beautiful celebration of a specific style of living. The danger arises when we forget it is a style, a variation, a game, and start believing it is the absolute truth. The danger arises when we take the social institution seriously. We treat the nation-state or the racial category as if it were a biological organism. But it is not. It is a fiction. A useful fiction sometimes, but a lethal one when misunderstood. The struggle you feel, the defensiveness, the quickness to judge, the subtle tightening of the chest when you encounter the unknown, is the struggle of the mask trying to protect itself. The mask is terrified that if it falls off, there will be nothing behind it. The social persona, the white man, the black man, the Asian man, is a costume. It is a role we have been handed by history. We did not write the script, but we have become method actors, so lost in the character that we have forgotten the actor. And the actor is not a category. The actor is consciousness itself. The actor is the witnessing presence that looks out of your eyes and out of the eyes of your enemy. It is the same light shining through different colored lamps. To realize this is not to become blind to color. We are not striving for a drab color blindness where we pretend we don't see difference. That is just another form of repression. We are striving for color celebration without color hierarchy. We are striving to see the difference as aesthetic, not existential. A red rose is different from a yellow tulip, but the rose does not try to kill the tulip. The rose does not organize a roses-only committee to purge the garden of tulips. The rose simply is. It occupies its space, it drinks the same water, it grows from the same soil. The garden is beautiful because of the variation. If the garden were a monoculture, it would be susceptible to disease. It would be fragile. Diversity is not just a political slogan, it is a biological imperative. Resilience comes from variety. Strength comes from the interplay of differences. By trying to purify our societies, by trying to wall ourselves off into homogeneous enclaves, we are making ourselves weak. We are cutting ourselves off from the genetic and cultural vitality of the species. So, as we stand in the midst of this analysis, looking at the wreckage caused by our imaginary boundaries, we must ask, what is it that we are actually defending? Are we defending our culture? Culture changes every day. Are we defending our blood? Blood is just chemistry, indistinguishable under a microscope. Are we defending our values? If our values require hatred to sustain them, are they worth defending? We are defending a ghost. We are defending the self-image. And the self-image is a bottomless pit of insecurity. It can never be safe enough. It can never be big enough. It can never be pure enough. As long as we identify with the image, we will be at war. The trial is to let the image crack, to let the walls of the fortress crumble, to look over the ramparts and see that the army gathering on the plains is not an invading horde, but a mirror image of ourselves, lost in the same confusion, frightened by the same shadows, seeking the same warmth. We are all manifestations of the same energy, playing hide and seek with itself. We are the universe pretending to be strangers. And the game has gone on for a very long time. It has become rough. We have hurt each other. We have forgotten that we are playing. But the moment you see the other not as a threat to your existence, but as a necessary partner in it, the ground to your figure, the south to your north, the fear begins to evaporate. You realize that you are not an isolated wave fighting the ocean. You are the ocean, waving, and the other waves are just you, doing something different over there. This insight is the turning point. It is the moment the hero stops fighting the dragon and realizes the dragon is guarding a treasure. The treasure is the realization of wholeness. The bad guy was the teacher all along, pushing us, challenging us, forcing us to define ourselves, until finally we grew big enough to encompass him too. We are now ready to move from the diagnosis to the cure. We have seen the illusion. We have seen how the in-group creates the out-group to prop up its own fragile ego. We have seen the necessity of the other. Now we must ask, how do we live this truth? How do we return to the marketplace, to the dinner table, to the voting booth with this new vision? How do we wash the eyes of our mind so that we see people, not labels? We have arrived at the summit of our journey. We have traversed the valley of the ordinary world, where the illusion of separation creates fear and anxiety. We have climbed through the trials of the in-group and the out-group, realizing that our enemies are actually the secret collaborators in the construction of our identity. Now we stand at the precipice of a new understanding, a vantage point from which the chaotic battlefield of human differences transforms into a harmonious dance. The realization we are approaching is known in the ancient traditions as the unity of opposites. It is the cure for the hallucination of the separate self. It is the understanding that the world is not composed of warring factions, but of a single, seamless process that expresses itself through duality. To understand this, we must look at the fundamental nature of energy, which is to say, the fundamental nature of you. All energy moves in waves. A wave is a crest and a trough. You cannot have a wave with only crests. That would be a flat plateau. To have the high, you must have the low. To have the loud, you must have the silent. To have the existence, you must have the non-existence. This is the pulse of the cosmos. It is a vibration. When we look at society, we see white and black, us and them, self and other, as if they were solid, static rocks crashing into each other. But from the perspective of the Tao, or the unified field, these are not rocks. They are the crests and troughs of a single cultural vibration. The universe is waving, and it is waving us. The liberation comes when you realize that you are not the cork bobbing on the surface of the water, terrified of the next wave. You are the water. You are the ocean that is doing the waving. The conflicts, the differences, the vast array of human colors and cultures, these are not mistakes to be corrected. They are the magnificent complexity of the pattern you are weaving. So, how do we bring this high-flying metaphysical insight down into the street? How does it change the way we look at a stranger on the subway, or how we react to a news report about racial tension? It changes everything because it shifts your stance from resistance to recognition. When you operate from the illusion of separation, your default setting is defense. You walk through the world with your muscles tensed, your psychological armor plated, scanning for threats. You categorize everyone you meet, friend or foe, same or different, safe or dangerous. This constant categorization exhausts the spirit. It blocks the flow of love, which is nothing more than the energy of connection. But when you operate from the insight of mutual arising, you realize that the stranger is not a stranger. They are a variation of the theme that is you. Imagine for a moment that you are God, not the bearded tyrant in the sky who judges you for your sins, but the ultimate ground of being, the infinite consciousness that dreams the universe into existence. If you were this infinite consciousness, knowing everything, being everywhere, absolute and eternal, you would eventually get bored. There would be no surprise, no adventure, no other to interact with. So, what would you do? You would play a game. You would pretend that you are not God. You would pretend to be a multitude of different people, with different faces, different histories, and different prejudices. You would hide from yourself in a trillion different disguises to see if you could find yourself again. You would create the drama of conflict just to feel the thrill of resolution. You would invent black and white to play out a grand drama of light and shadow. This is the cosmic hide and seek. And the person you think of as your enemy, the person whose politics you despise, the person whose skin color makes you uncomfortable, or who is uncomfortable with yours, that person is essentially God in disguise, playing the role of the antagonist in your specific drama. They are doing you the service of providing the resistance against which you can define your own character. When you see this, really see it, the hatred evaporates. It is replaced by a kind of cosmic humor. You look at the bigot or the angry activist or the fearful isolationist, and instead of seeing a monster, you see a masked actor. You see the fear behind their eyes, the same fear that lives in you. You see that they are just playing their part in the game of black and white a little too seriously. They have forgotten it is a game. They think the lines on the map are real cuts in the earth. This realization brings a profound compassion, not a sentimental, pitying compassion that looks down on others, but a respectful compassion that recognizes the shared predicament. We are all in the same boat, and the boat is the planet, floating in the silence of space. To fight amongst ourselves is as absurd as the left hand trying to strangle the right hand. This does not mean we stop working for justice. This does not mean we accept cruelty or systemic oppression. But it changes how we work. We no longer fight against evil. We work for clarity. We do not try to destroy the bad guys because we know that creates a vacuum that will just be filled by new bad guys. Instead, we try to wake them up. We try to show them that the walls they are building are locking them in, not keeping others out. The action of the philosophical first aid hero is to become a transparent medium. Instead of being a solid wall that reflects and amplifies the anger of the world, you become like empty space. When prejudice comes at you, you don't fight it, you let it pass through you. You don't catch the ball. You don't pick up the other end of the rope. If someone shouts a slur or makes a judgment, the ego wants to shout back. It wants to prove them wrong. It wants to win. But the awakened mind sees that the insult is a noise coming from a machine that is malfunctioning. Why get angry at a machine? Why take personal offense at a storm? The storm is just doing what storms do. The racist is just doing what confused egos do. By refusing to engage in the polarity of hate, you break the cycle. You stop feeding the pendulum. You offer the other a space in which their aggression falls flat because it meets no resistance. And in that silence, transformation can occur. The practical insight here is to practice the look. Next time you are in a public place, look at the people around you. Really look at them. Don't look at their clothes or their status or their race. Look at their eyes. Try to see the I in them that is the same as the I in you. Ask yourself, what is it like to be that person? What is it like to wake up inside that skin, to have those memories, those fears? If you do this honestly, you will feel a sudden shift. The otherness will dissolve. You will realize that if you were born in their circumstances, with their genetics and their conditioning, you would be them. You would be doing exactly what they are doing. There is no you separate from the universe that could have done otherwise. The illusion that you are a superior soul who just happened to land in a better body or a better culture is the root of the arrogance that drives racism. Dismantle that arrogance, and you dismantle the foundation of the conflict. You are the universe experiencing itself as a human being, and so is everyone else. We are all apertures through which the cosmos is looking at itself. Some apertures are clear, some are clouded, some are tinted with the color of prejudice. But the light shining through them is the same light. Once you ground yourself in this reality, the anxiety of the ordinary world begins to fade. You are no longer threatened by diversity, you are delighted by it. You see the myriad forms of humanity as the infinite creativity of the Tao. You realize that the wisdom of insecurity means accepting that nothing is fixed. Races mix, cultures blend, boundaries shift. This flow is life. To try to stop it, to try to freeze the frame, is death. Embrace the flow. Embrace the insecurity. Realize that you are secure not because you have built a wall, but because you are the flow. You cannot fall out of the universe. You cannot be alienated from reality. You are it. As we return from this journey, carrying the elixir of this insight, we bring back a quiet power. It is the power of a mind that no longer needs an enemy to feel real. It is the power of a heart that can look at the chaos of the world and see the underlying order, the great rhythmic dance of the opposites. We return to our communities not as warriors for a cause, but as healers of perception. We heal the world by healing our own vision. We stop projecting our shadow onto the neighbor. We withdraw the blame. We take responsibility for the entire mess because we realize that I and the world are not two things. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. This is the deepest magic. By seeing the unity in the diversity, you actually help to create it. You become a node of peace in the network of conflict. You become the eye of the storm. So, the next time you feel the rise of the us versus them instinct, the next time you feel the prickle of prejudice or the heat of defensive anger, pause. Take a breath. Remember the magnet. Remember the wave. Remember that you cannot have the front without the back. Smile at the cosmic joke. And then drop the rope. Walk into the world not as a skin-encapsulated ego defending its territory, but as the open space in which all these people, all these colors, all these dramas are allowed to be. Be the space. Be the silence that holds the sound. Be the consciousness that holds the forms. In this realization, there is no white, no black, no foreign, no domestic. There is just this. The eternal, vibrating, luminous now, dancing in a billion different disguises, pretending to be you and me and them. And what a marvelous play it is. Now let us rest in the understanding that the walls we see are merely painted on the lens of our own perception. When we wipe the lens clean, the boundaries vanish, and we are left with the startling, beautiful truth. There are no others. There is only us, reflecting each other forever in the hall of mirrors we call life.